government cover-ups, mind control, the world elite, Area 51, chemtrails, 5G, unknown creatures. Some of the world's wildest, most out-there conspiracy theories have one thing in common. They're pretty much real. So grab your tinfoil hat and join me to look at some of the times the unbelievable has turned out to be true. Conspiracy theorists, sad middle-aged men who still live with their moms and spend way too much time in online chat groups. Well, that's what they would have you believe, because many of those apparently crazy theories have turned out to be partially or wholly accurate. And if you think the idea that there is a they is also a ridiculous conspiracy dreamed up by people who think the government is trying to control us, don't be too sure. Because there is plenty of evidence that governments around the world have done that, and maybe still are. From the 1950s to at least the 70s, security and intelligence organisations in the US, Canada, the UK, France, Israel, and many other countries conducted research into a range of techniques for mind control and psychological warfare, including drugs and hypnosis. The Soviet Union allegedly created a range of psychotronic techniques using electromagnetic or acoustic radiation that could influence thoughts and emotions and even read minds. It's been claimed that descendants of those weapons are to blame for Havana syndrome, where staff at the US Embassy in Cuba reported a range of odd symptoms that had no obvious cause. The US itself probably led the world in such techniques, with a range of agencies including the CIA, FBI, and NSA all conducting research and, amazingly, using the methods they discovered against the US population. Whole towns were dosed with mind-altering drugs, fake brothels were set up so the clients could be kidnapped and experimented on. Project COINTELPRO was an FBI operation aimed at groups and individuals it saw as enemies of the US, including alleged communist sympathizers, civil rights groups, and many high-profile Hollywood figures. As well as good old-fashioned methods like assassination, the Bureau developed sophisticated new propaganda and behavioral techniques based on those used by both sides during World War II. The CIA took things even further, with notorious programs like MKUltra, which also investigated psychological torture with added LSD. You might think this last one was just an excuse to have some fun, but the research was deadly serious, and the techniques were used in Operation Chaos, the CIA's equivalent to COINTELPRO, that also targeted left-wing groups during the 1960s. As I've explained in a previous video, it could even have been a factor in the killings carried out by Charles Manson and his family. Not to be outdone in the battle to twist minds, in 1964 the NSA staged a fake attack on 2 US cruisers in the Gulf of Tonkin and placed the blame on North Vietnam in an attempt to sway public and congressional opinion behind military action in the area. It worked. And so began the Vietnam War. Another unbelievable conspiracy revolved around Project Sunshine. For years, there had been claims that the US government was stealing recently dead bodies, including many babies and children, for use in tests to measure the effects on nuclear fallout. Crazy as it sounds, it was eventually shown to be true, though the government was quick to point out they only stole bits of the bodies. So that's okay then. The scandal caused when many of the programs were uncovered in the 1970s means their use is now strictly controlled by laws and ethical guidelines. But some of the same behavioural techniques are still in use in such everyday mental health treatments as cognitive behavioural therapy. So perhaps the government is still involved, in telling us how to think. Though at least it hasn't been involved in any more covert action against its own citizens. Well, unless you count the millions of ordinary people whose conversations and messages were intercepted by the NSA, of course, as Edward Snowden revealed in 2013. And then, of course, there are the birds. Definitely one of my favourite conspiracy theories of all time. The basic idea is that birds aren't actually cute, feathery little things that eat seeds and lay eggs, but instead highly sophisticated surveillance robots that are watching our every move. Some versions of the story say other animals have also been used, such as rats and even mosquitoes. But not only is the story true in many ways, it's even weirder than the conspiracy. During the 1960s, IQ Zoo was a popular attraction in Hot Springs, Arkansas that featured trained animals, including, I kid you not, dancing chickens and cows that played bingo. But it was also the front for a company called Animal Behavior Enterprises, which had a much less fluffy purpose, providing trained animals for a number of agencies, including the US Navy and, yet again, the CIA, where they actually were used for intelligence gathering. One of these programs went by the greatest secret codename of all time, Acoustic Kitty, and it was, every bit, as crazy as it sounds. First, Bailey and his team would train an unsuspecting moggy to seek out human voices. Then, in an hour-long operation, vets would implant a microphone in the cat's ear canal, connected to a small transmitter at the base of its skull. The robo-cat would then be infiltrated into targets such as foreign embassies to eavesdrop on conversations full of juicy secrets. That was the theory anyway. But in Acoustic Kitty's first operational deployment, attempts to overhear the conversation of two enemy agents outside the US Embassy in Washington were thwarted when, according to some accounts, the cat was run over by a taxi. Rumours say that trying to create a $6 million cat actually cost the CIA $20 million, all wasted when the program was abandoned. Experiments with other animals and birds were much more successful, though. Ravens were used to carry covert listening devices to eavesdrop on targets across the Soviet bloc, and allegedly could even open drawers and bring any documents they contained back to their handlers. According to Bob Bailey, one of those involved, they never found an animal they couldn't train. That even included spiders, rats and mosquitoes, which leads to the possibility that the use of such animal spies went a lot further. In the 1950s, Chairman Mao of China implemented a campaign he called the Four Pests. At face value, this was designed to improve agricultural yield by eliminating flies, mosquitoes, rats and sparrows. As part of the Smash Sparrows campaign, peasants were to be ordered to make noise incessantly to keep birds in the air until they eventually died of exhaustion. In farming terms, it was a disaster with no sparrows left. China was hit by a plague of locusts instead. But who knows? Perhaps the real reason behind it was that Mao feared some of the CIA's finest feathered operatives were spying on his meetings. He could well have been right. Dolphins are still used by the US Navy to this day, but the CIA is cagey about its involvement with animal espionage. When a Freedom of Information request was submitted, the agency's response was, "The fact of the existence or non-existence of requested records is currently and properly classified," which I guess is probably a yes. So next time you're in the park, best be careful. Just because the birds are real, it doesn't mean they're not spying on you anyway. Of course, in today's technological world, there are probably much more sophisticated ways to monitor and control everyone than by using bionic birds, which is probably why the Tinfoil Hat Brigade came up with our next two conspiracies. They are publicly rejected by most experts as bizarre and unbelievable, which means, naturally, they likely contain a lot of truth. Many people believe there's more to those high-altitude vapour trails emitted by jet aircraft than meets the eye. Could they be releasing chemicals designed to alter our climate or control our minds? Perhaps even control the population by spreading birth control drugs, directly or through water supplies? Theoretically, the answer could actually be yes to all of that. Pretty much as soon as the airplane was invented, people began looking at ways to use it as a weapon, not just by dropping bombs, but spreading chemicals. Crop spraying with aircraft was widespread for many years, and the notorious Agent Orange was dispersed by air during the Vietnam War to deforest the jungles used by the Viet Cong. There are persistent reports that the CIA also experimented with spraying LSD across whole communities, including the village of Port Saint-Esprit in France. The idea of changing our climate in this way is also proven science. Dust plumes, such as those emitted by an Icelandic volcano in 2010, have been shown to have a cooling effect on the atmosphere. Injecting such material into the upper atmosphere through contrails might well alter the climate. While there's no evidence any operations of this type are currently deployed, one very similar technique definitely is underway. Cloud seeding techniques, spraying chemicals to aid the formation of clouds and promote rainfall, are in use around the world. Oh, and speaking of the water, there are conspiracy theories that governments around the world secretly inject the drugs directly into our water supplies. That also has happened. In the 1940s, the US began to add fluoride to drinking water with little regulation and often without the communities affected being told what was happening. And it's no surprise that, yet again, the CIA is alleged to have dosed several towns as part of its MK-Ultra tests. Such practices are now, of course, illegal, and as we saw in the last chapter, governments always stick to the law. Right? Right. Many theories also swirl around 5G and other mobile phone technology, not just regarding possible health concerns, but that such technology allows governments to monitor our lives and perhaps also exert control over our minds. Edward Snowden proved pretty spectacularly that the government was monitoring everyone's lives through Operation Prism. So that part at least gets a big yes. And while there is no evidence of mind control or publicly known techniques that could accomplish it, as we've seen, there are many rumours that Russia at least has developed forms of mind control and even mind reading based on electromagnetic radiation. The same sort of radiation emitted by your mobile. So maybe don't throw away the tinfoil just yet. As happened with Edward Snowden, many of the biggest government cover-ups have been dismissed as conspiracy theories until they turn out to be fact. The Watergate scandal that brought down President Nixon and began the exposure of many illegal intelligence operations. The Iran-Contra affair that almost did the same for President Reagan. And perhaps the next big scandal, what exactly has been going on in the Nevada desert? For decades, perhaps the most famous conspiracy theory of all has revolved around a remote airbase unofficially called Area 51, where, it was claimed, something odd was happening. Where strange shapes were routinely seen in the sky, and anyone who got too close was liable to disappear. Yet the government refused to even confirm that the base existed, let alone explain what happened there. In 1989, Robert Scott Lazar caused a sensation by claiming that Area 51 was home to a program dedicated to reverse engineering alien technology and using it to create a new generation of ultra-secret aircraft. The base held not just crashed alien spacecraft, he said, but the bodies of their occupants too. Lazar gave detailed evidence, but it was rubbished by officials and most of the media, who turned him into a laughingstock. Strangely though, concerted attempts were also made to destroy his credibility. leaks threw doubt on his educational record. He was later convicted of a bizarre range of crimes, from running a prostitution ring to shipping restricted chemicals across state lines, trashing his reputation even further. But, as so often, it seems the government's version of the truth wasn't exactly true. The public unveiling of the previously hyper-secret F-117 Nighthawk and B-2 stealth bomber showed that the eyewitness accounts of strange-looking objects were completely accurate. Declassification of these weapons and earlier programs, including the U-2 and SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance aircraft, forced the authorities to officially confirm the existence of Area 51 in 2013. And in 2023, a former NSA operative named David Grush, testifying on oath before a congressional committee, all but repeated Bob Lazar's original supposedly crazy claims that the government has alien spacecraft and bodies and has been actively reverse engineering their secrets for decades. Though the story is still playing out, it certainly raises suspicions that Bob Lazar may have been right all along, and the trashing of his reputation was yet another attempt by the authorities to discredit a wild-sounding conspiracy theory that is actually true. If the claims are finally proven, it won't be the first time that stories of unknown life forms have turned out to be true. It's happened right here with earthly creatures that were thought to be just a conspiracy. From sea monsters to mysterious humanoid apes and even dinosaurs, there are hundreds of tales of unknown creatures stalking our world. Eyewitness accounts, even photographs and video, seem to back them up. The Sasquatch and Yeti, the Loch Ness Monster, big cats roaming parts of the UK and United States, all have been laughed at and dismissed as hoaxes. And it's true that as yet, there is no definite proof for any of those cases. But equally bizarre stories have been shown to be true. For centuries, sailors told tales of encounters with huge tentacled monsters the size of their ships and were mocked for their pains. Yet remains of strange and unknown creatures do occasionally wash ashore, even today. In November 1873, a fisherman off the Newfoundland coast told a typically tall tale, claiming his boat had been attacked by just such a tentacled creature. This time, though, the fisherman had managed to hack off 2 of those tentacles. One apparently got fed to his dog. The other he sold to an Irish-born Presbyterian minister and amateur naturalist named Moses Harvey, who became obsessed with proving that the creature was real. Eventually, Harvey succeeded in acquiring a nearly complete specimen of his monster and photographed it propped up in his bathtub. So it was that the world got its first ever glimpse of a giant squid, part of an elusive family of creatures that even today are little understood. The first images of a living specimen weren't captured until 2004, and much larger creatures than any yet seen are thought to exist deep in the oceans. Evidence also suggests there are further unknown predators in our depths. In 2007 off Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic, and again in 2015 near Hawaii, scientists recovered whale carcasses covered with huge bite marks that match no known creature. One of the main arguments against the theory that seemingly prehistoric creatures survive in some Scottish and Canadian lakes was also disproved in spectacular style by the discovery of living examples of the coelacanth, a species known only from fossil records, proving that creatures from the age of dinosaurs could still remain among us undetected. Supposed remains of unknown land predators have also been recovered, with inconclusive DNA results. But similar strange predation from apparently unknown creatures has been noted on animal carcasses. So, watch this space. Often it seems that governments and other agencies are behind many of the conspiracies we've looked at, but some theories say even they're just puppets, and the true power lies with a shadowy group of the rich and powerful. The true masters who are influencing every aspect of our lives, exerting control over governments and the media. I looked at the story in my video about the Illuminati and found there was no concrete evidence because, by definition, a group that controlled the media could make sure the evidence was hidden. But there is proof that such a thing has been attempted. The election of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1932 was hugely unpopular among many banking and business leaders in the US, who feared that his New Deal pledge to provide jobs for the unemployed was a move towards socialism that would wreck the economy. And it seems they came up with a cunning plan to do something about it. Brigadier General Smedley Butler was a highly decorated veteran of many wars, loved and respected by his men. Shortly after his retirement in 1931, he claimed to have been approached by representatives of a shadowy group of high-ranking businessmen with an extraordinary proposal. He was to lead a coup and be installed as President of the United States, as he later testified. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government. If true, it amounted to an attempt by the rich and powerful to literally take over America, to abolish democracy and run the country to suit their own interests. When his claims first surfaced, the same rich and powerful individuals certainly did their best to squash the story. According to the New York Times, it was a gigantic hoax and a bald and unconvincing narrative. General Douglas MacArthur called it the best laugh story of the year. But according to Smedley, MacArthur was part of the plot, so he would say that, wouldn't he? Luckily for America, Smedley turned down the chance to be the 34th president and instead revealed the details to a congressional committee, which found his evidence convincing. But perhaps the next plot didn't get found out, and big business is in control. The Bohemian Grove is a private club in Monte Rio, California, where it's said this rich and powerful elite of old white men meet up once a year to agree on how the world should be run. So far, so wacko, until you look at some of the few names of the members that are known. Former Presidents Herbert Hoover, Dwight Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. Media barons including William Randolph Hearst, Ted Turner, and even Walter Cronkite. And with that sort of control over media and government, anything would be possible. So, if this video suddenly vanishes without trace, you'll know who to blame. For more on UFOs, the World Elite, and Charles Manson, check out these videos. And be sure to like and subscribe for more mysterious conspiracies. Thanks for watching.